Hello, everyone.
Hello.
welcome,
Hi.
welcome to the 11th episode of On the Inside podcast. We are Sandbox, Sean, Amerie, and Nico, and our names are missing. I realize. What happened to our
Oh, yeah,
names?
that's true.
Uh,
I don't know.
there we
Oh, you're
go.
there. Okay.
Hello to you from all over the world. Hello from the lovely city of Hanoi. Previously, I was in Ho Chi Minh. Now I'm in Hanoi. Emery's in Singapore. It's about 10:40 in Singapore, is it?
10:40.
10:40.
Yep.
10:40. Yep. I'm 1 hour behind, 9:40. And Nico with his sexy voice today.
Yeah, I got it. Not COVID. Don't worry. It's like not the virus, but I do have a sore throat. Yeah, I'm doing fine otherwise. Yeah, it's like British bacteria. I don't know. I'm in the UK right now. Yeah.
This is the second season of On the Inside podcast. On the very first season, we explored different emotions. The theme for the second season is relationships.
Mm.
All right. And this week, oh, what a topic. Single again. Oh, man. Oh, so sad. Every time I just think about it. But then again, who says it has to be sad, right?
We're all smiling. You realize?
Okay. So let's get right into it, so we can save Nico some of the save him from losing more of his voice,
The
Yeah.
remnants of his voice.
the remnants of his voice. Okay, single again. Well, probably I would say one of the most challenging times in anyone's life, especially mine, and I think it is for me a difficult topic to discuss because it's been quite recent for me, right? So my friends would know it's been a difficult time, but there are also positives to it, and well, I guess that's why we're all smiling, right? Okay, let's start with our very first topic, and let's talk about this, right? So we've all been through difficult times, we've all been through heartbreak, we've all been through the experience of suddenly feeling that something's missing in our lives. All right, so let's start off with this topic. When you unfortunately or fortunately become single again, and you go to bed, next morning you wake up, and suddenly reality strikes. What's the first thing in your mind? Um, Emery, you want to go first?
Really?
Of
Really?
course.
I thought you would want to go first, Sean.
Well, I could go first.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Okay, I would say the first thing that comes to my mind, the first thing I feel is it's a very big feeling of emptiness. Yeah, because it feels like a big part of me is suddenly just gone, right? Because when I'm in a relationship, I share a big part of my life with the other person. The other person has um a very she means a lot to me. Yeah, and you share your ups and your downs. She a lot of times my girlfriend would be a very strong pillar of support and a great motivation for me to push on for a lot of the difficult times. So I think the most important, or not the most important, the most prominent feeling I get is a feeling of emptiness. Um, Sometimes, and in the most recent time, it's a feeling of a loss of aim, I would say. Yeah, it's a loss of direction because a big part of what I did circled around a future for both of us, and that made it very difficult to cope because suddenly a lot of things didn't matter as much anymore. Yeah. So yeah, I guess it's a heavier start than normal to the topic, but that's the usually the first thing that comes to my mind when I wake up the next morning. It's just, in short, I would say it's painful. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Emery, your turn.
Yeah, I mean, I can echo that too. I mean, I can totally relate to that. I think if there was a theme across all the different times I experienced that, it would probably be waking up with that ache in your heart. I mean, that ache is, real and intense, and you can't really shrug that off, and feeling like you have to go through the day despite having that ache. um it is really the start of a grieving process, isn't it? Right. At the same time, I also recall having experienced sense of liberation and freedom, but depending on how that relationship was for me. Yeah, so I had been also feeling quite excited about that bit of freedom there. So yeah, I think different experiences, but for the most part, I would say it's a heartache that was really hard.
Nico, the morning after you wake up.
Yeah, so I don't usually have like a lot of clarity. So it's not like, the sense of emptiness as you shared, Sean, or maybe like the heartache, the freedom. It's just like I don't really know how I feel really often. So more like that blunting thing. And so then that means like, so I would tend to organize my day if that's if it's a weekend, obviously, but otherwise, I try to leave some space, late during the day to kind of like do things that get me out of that like blunted kind of like no feeling state. So maybe go for a walk, or
You actually
so
have the
like
mood to go for a walk.
yeah, but in an attempt to kind of like really I don't know, like connect with myself. Like I tend to be like really disconnected and kind of like not want to feel really often. That will happen. I mean, that's been my experience. And so yeah, going for a walk, I mean, some kind of like physical engagement, but alone. I wouldn't want to be around people. It's more of a time where I need to like um, I don't know, give space. I don't want to say like care for myself. That's just very cliche, but it's not, and it's also not that. But just being space where I'm on my own. I might be walking. I might be those moments where I'm like in my bubble, and I kind of like try to let the feeling come and try to work through them and everything. At least as a first, obviously not fully work through them, but at least feel them. Yeah. So because I tend to kind of like shut things down often. Yeah.
Do you can any of you recall, or can all of you recall the most painful experience? What was it like? Like, did you feel like doing anything? Did you like Nico might have gone for a walk, right? Like
Yeah.
uh can you recall, Emery, like what it was like for you in the worst time ever?
Wow, that's probably a really long time ago, I think. Why are you laughing, Sean?
Says a lot about
No, um, when you're in your younger days, right, it would really, really sting, right? Especially, if it was one of your first few experiences. And yeah, not that it gets any easier, but then, you know, like the first few times you go through that, it must be, really bit of a shock, right? Because also, if you're a lot younger, you don't have the life experience to know how to cope, right? A lot of things just feel so much bigger than you. Yeah, so I would say maybe my early 20s. Yeah, that would be a lot harder for me then. Um, yeah, I think it was really hard. I don't remember very much now. Yeah, I'm not that young. And but I remember a lot of my friends took turns to check in on me. I was super lucky. And it was a lot of just, keeping myself occupied, not ruminating too much, taking turns to call my friends at night. I needed to, sort of do the processing again and again. I had to keep talking about it. I don't know how my friends tolerated all of those conversations, but it was very helpful for me. It's almost like I am really learning to, talk about something that was so painful that over time it just stopped being as painful.
you grew numb to it.
not numb, but I think I came to a point where, yeah, it hurt, but it didn't sort of like weigh me down so much anymore.
Nico, any memories?
Well, I've specific. So I was thinking about the friend thing. So I did, yeah. I this time I thought sought support from friends, but it was really just in that not feeling anything moment. So it would look like, so it's nothing like Mary just shared.
Mhm.
So it really just looked like me like sitting with my friend like somewhere in a cafe and just not talking for like 20 minutes.
So you hang out and you don't talk?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not
That's
like
cool.
something I do regularly, but that's just how that turns out to be. It's not what I didn't mind either, but it was kind of like the question was like, so how are you doing? And then it was like 20 minutes of me not saying anything.
Oh wow.
But it was fine, like really just kind of what I needed, I guess. You know what I mean? Kind of, yeah. Eventually I did share more, but there was this moment where it's kind of like, it was nice to be there with someone who and care about how you feel. And I guess it went in the direction of offering me that space to settle down and feel something. And I'm glad my friend kind of gave me the time to do that at my own pace.
Yeah. I just wanted to add that, Nico, because of your baritone voice today, I don't know, it just gives like everything you're saying like a different quality.
Right.
You sound like a rock star.
Yeah,
I don't
like
know.
a voice actor or something for like 2 days. Gonna be that. I have career possibilities. Yeah.
I think my most painful experience is, I mean, other than crying and crying and crying, like, so like I didn't feel like doing anything. I didn't feel like eating anything. So people who know me would know I love food. And the day after I broke up, then my parents brought me out to eat, and they like kind of dragged me out of the house, right? So my dad, my mom, and my sister. So we went to this coffee shop to eat, and there was we ordered kway chap. Kway chap is like a what do you call it? It's like a some flat noodles and with some of the innards. Yeah, usually I love it, right? And all that time, right hand chopsticks, left hand spoon. I look at the food and I started crying at the coffee shop at lunchtime. Yeah, that was painful. Gosh. Yeah. But one of the nicer things that also happened is I noticed that people whom I haven't been in contact for a while actually came forward and offered me support. And it was surprising to me because even I normally I would feel like, oh, we don't know each other that well. Why would you come down and why would you approach me and ask me how I am and offer me support? But it surprisingly felt very comforting. Yeah. And if I think of one of the nicest things that someone did for me is this person who, okay, so everyone send messages, right? And they say, oh, not everyone send it. A few people send messages, all right, on WhatsApp, on Facebook. So there's one group who will send messages and then just leave it. There are some that will send messages every single day, even though I have nothing to reply, but he'll just send messages every day. Are you okay? How are you doing? Same question every day, but every day they'll ask, which is it's nice to know. And then there was this guy who I know quite okay. We're pretty good friends. We used to exercise together a lot when we stayed nearer. He called me at about 6:10 p.m. And I remember because I was crying in bed and I picked up the phone. And, he was like, hey, bro, how are you? And I'm like, I said, obviously painful. And he said, hey, I saw the messages, but I didn't know what to say. So I thought I'd just give you a call and just ask you how you're doing, if there's anything I can do for you. I was like, oh, that's so nice. Yeah, and he dragged me out. So a few days later, it was the weekend, and he came over to pick me up. And I was like, oh, I don't know where to go. And he's like, oh, he took out. I went inside the car. I sat down, and he's like, okay. Then he took out a few pieces of paper. He's like, okay, choose one. So like I took one, and it's like that location. And it's like, oh, okay, we're going to Changi to eat. I was like, it's so much like a date, right? I don't even do that. I don't even do that for my ex.
That's sweet though. That's really sweet of your
That's
friend.
sweet.
Yeah, but it's the first time I realized how important or how good it felt to like actually speak to someone on the phone, right? Because I think these days a lot of us are not used to picking up the phone and calling. A lot of it is about texting. And yeah, like one phone call could make such a big difference, right? Even though I didn't really know what to say. Yeah. All right. As with the last few episodes, we have an article. Search by our dear Amerie.
Yeah. And as a result, we have an article from Psychology Today. No surprises. And it's titled 3 Reasons Why Being Single Could Be the New Finding the One. All right. So are we ready? We're going to jump into the different points on here.
Ready?
Let's see. All right. So this is by, hang on, I need to credit this, John Kim, also known as the Angry Therapist. I don't know him per se. I just happened to, find this article. And the first point on here would be, the richest soil for growth is when you're single. He says that when you're in a relationship, you're less motivated to examine the black box of what happened in your previous relationships. And essentially, he argues that the growth soil is so rich during the times between relationships. As we don't actually have yet another person to move on to, right? And as a result, we can learn to actually slow down and look at ourselves. If one moves from one relationship to another too quickly, there's really limited amount of time to work on ourselves.
What do you actually do when you work on yourself?
This is such a big question.
Yeah, I was just wondering, right? Because you get up, you sometimes have nothing to do, sometimes you have stuff to do. Like what does it actually mean to work on yourself if you just kind of, every day I got to go back to work?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, very simply, I think working on yourself also means that, you want to be someone you want to be with, right? Yeah, I think a lot of times, without realizing, I think some people might be looking for a partner, perhaps, also as a way to avoid having that time with themselves. Because they fear that, if they actually had all those time, they might find things about themselves they would be super uncomfortable with. They just don't really like having that alone time with themselves. Things like that. So perhaps working on ourselves is really to help us be able to connect with ourselves better, to have a better relationship with ourselves, to be the partner we would want to be for ourselves.
Also, I'm wondering if there's an element of if like connecting about how we feel really, because when you mention moving on to a next relationship and so on, it means also you really don't take the time to really feel the depth of what you're feeling, which makes sense because it can be really scary. But I think it's like it can be a measure also of how meaningful a relationship was, even as it ended. And I think that's something that can be like, I don't know if it's useful to do before you go into another relationship. I think it's a kind of a tall order to take stock of like everything that was going on in a relationship before you move on. I don't think anyone would be able to do that. It's kind of a process that unfolds over like a long time, sometimes years, right? You might look back at past relationship and see things in there that you you didn't notice first about yourself, about the dynamics, and in a way maybe that it's now showing up in a current relationship and so on. But for me, that also that element of really, you know, maybe understanding how you were functioning in relationship, what was um, maybe stifling, what was like liberating, what and also, so in the emphasis on the article seems to be really about selling like the single phase. But what's something I said before. I mean, I think we all agree on that. But the guy said there is a lot of like personal growth and work that that has been done in relationship as well. It's not like, to me, it's not like you only focus on one. I think in relationship there's also already opportunity for growth and everything. Um, and to me, that value in like looking back at like a relationship in that sense, and trying to get a sense of like how much you've grown from it, like how is that changed you, because it's also part of what you would carry forward with you. You know, you keep it. That's what you get to keep with you in a way, other than memories. And I can really sorry, that was a bit, but it's true, and I can really change the way you. Yeah, it was a bit dramatic. I'm happy acknowledging that, but but yeah, and that's really what you can carry with you. I mean, that growth you already done actually. Get what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. So are you saying that it really doesn't matter if you're in a relationship or if you're single, there is always opportunities for growth if you want to?
Yeah, I think so.
Mm.
And I would even, well, I might be on the view that there's really even better opportunity almost in a relationship, because you have some pressure to change if you want to stay in a relationship. Sometimes, you have to adjust the way you function and everything with the other person, or you have to change things about yourself sometimes, reevaluate and everything. And that might not be true for someone who's like single long distance. I mean, for a long time, because you can't settle in your ways. And I mean, it's a bit cliche, but it's really true. So there's to me that those two moments really are important, like, in that sense. And in that sense, I think, I agree with the author. It's like in a relationship where you have that kind of pressure to and motivation to change and adjust, and right after, when like obviously something might have gone wrong, and then you have to reevaluate if you want to. I mean, if you can, because it can be a lot sometimes. But there's these two opportunities there. Yeah, I feel.
Well,
Sean?
sometimes that liberating feeling comes because in the relationship you've been forced to compromise so much.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, and it's I don't really think that. I mean, okay, I don't really know. Is it really a bad thing? Because naturally, when you are together with someone, you try to compromise to whatever you can, as much as you can. But that's sometimes not the natural you, right? And when you become single again, then you suddenly have this feeling of, oh, like I'm finally set free. I can be like who I am again. Um, yeah, and there's this, for sometimes there's this feeling of euphoria, there's this feeling of excitement. Yeah. I remember that one of the things that you mentioned to me, Emery, was right after the breakup, was to ask myself what's important to me. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought, I thought that was a good reflection point, especially if you've spent or you haven't thought much of it at the time when you're attached. Yeah, and I realized that at some point I didn't quite know the answer. It took me a while to get it. And when I realized that, I suppose that in its form, it's some growth as well. Understanding myself a little bit better. I used to think that it's most important that as you move on from relationship to relationship, you might not know what you want, but you almost certainly know what you don't want. Yeah, and to look at it from a different perspective, which is, what's important to me, what am I really looking for in a relationship. Yeah, I felt like that helped me a lot, and in terms of growth as well. Yeah, understanding myself better. and that's something that's really hard to see when you're attached, right? Because
I agree.
you're in the state where you have to compromise because you're not alone. There's somebody else that you have to consider. There's someone else you have to think about.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I totally agree there. I think when you're in a relationship, you often have a more sort of team approach to things, even in terms of growth, right? Like I find personally for myself, the idea of growth is geared towards, how do we grow as a couple? Um,
Mm,
yeah, how can we do it better, right? What are your needs? How do I help, make things better for you? And as a result, there is little space for, what's going on for me and my role, right? And self growth, right? Not to say that there isn't growth at all, but certainly the focus is a bit different. um it's more focused on this thing between the two of you, right, than on, okay, as a person, what would I like for myself? And hence, a question like what's important to me is can be so hard to answer if you're immersed in that relationship, you're 120% in it, and there's really just no space for you. Yeah.
yeah. Mm.
Yeah, and just even if you have that drive to explore, you just might not have the time at all. Actually, it's what you gain back with being single again. You have all that time that you can use to move things around. So you might keep your core interest, your core activity,
Mm-hmm.
but you have that space where you can explore other things. What keeping a base, like what works for you, maybe friends or sport or whatever.
Unless you're a
And
workaholic, right? So
yeah, and then
yeah.
work with. But then I might open maybe new opportunity. Who knows? Start new projects or whatever. So then I still
Well, I
Yeah.
used to
bring
think
new
I was very much of a workaholic.
You still
But
are, Sean. You still are. Come on.
yeah,
own it.
it's still tough, right? I think I no, the biggest one of the biggest surprises for me was that I thought I would just work and get over it and move on and become better in whatever way, or at least at the very least gain some experience from the past, 5+ years. Uh, but it's not that easy, right? Yeah. So I don't know.
All right, moving on, shall we? Point two. Um, the picket fence has splinters. So I think this reference is probably not something we could relate to as easily, but essentially the author suggests that we are finally being honest about how hard marriages are, right? It's this idea that happily ever after really is a stage house that was sold to us, right? There's no such thing as happily ever after. And this is the ideal that people work towards, you know. But really, he says that there is no better time to build a life that's honest than when you're single. That's honest to you, yeah, when you're single. Sorry, it's hard for me to summarize all of this at one go, but yeah, that's what I picked out. Right, it might be a little bit imperfect, so yeah, the idea is there. What do you guys think?
So honest is it in a sense like honest about what relationship might are, or,
So essentially, we want
it
to.
doesn't mean like resetting your expectations. I mean, kind of like recalibrating your expectations for the fact
That's
that okay,
right.
it's not happily ever after. Is that what you mean?
Mm,
What
yeah.
does it mean when he says happily ever after was a stage house that was sold to us?
Um, it's an idea. It's an idea that was, painted, or an ideal that was um, ingrained in us, right? That as long as you have, a partner, you're in a good relationship, you get married, have kids, yeah, life will be good. But the truth is that it takes a lot of hard work. And there are a lot of things people don't talk about. People change, our needs change, and so he argues that um, when you're alone, this is the best time to really rebuild this idea of what it means, right? To this, well, he says that's a new picket fence. Um, that there is really no blueprint, there is no perfection, and a good time to kind of rewrite the definition is when you're single.
Mm. So it's like a reality check in some way.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Hmm. I think it's quite true for me. I usually at the end of a relationship and being single again, and the moment you look back, you realize that it's actually tough, right? It might seem easy, but it's actually pretty tough. Yeah, it's something that requires constant effort, constant communication. It doesn't just happen just like that, right? Yeah.
That makes sense. Also, there's some. I think you might, like in that phase. I think you really run a full spectrum of like fantasizing maybe something that works even better. Some magical thinking along the line where he says we shouldn't have, right? But that's just not. Something was just a bit off, but the next one is gonna be awesome. It's gonna be like, well, it's gonna, things gonna go well all the way, So there's this kind of extreme, and there's the other extreme where you become like really cynical. So there might be a risk to become cynical, like thinking in terms of like, well, it's work, right? So it's an exchange, it's contractual. It's how much you put in, how much you get out of it. And
Yeah.
and I think for different people, like the needle will have to move in different direction. My sense, right? I think there's really a maturity in looking at what's going on in a relationship or a marriage in terms of like cost benefit, really, in terms of like putting in effort, but also having an element of like there's moment of grace as well. It's not just always, it does happen that there are circumstances or sometimes are such that things go well for some time, and then they don't take so much work at certain period, at certain moments, certain season of relationships. And I think those two things are kind of true at the same time. I feel. I don't know if that makes sense, but and I mean grace is not always in the beginning. If we need to think, we talked about it. The honeymoon and everything. Yeah, there's that, but also there's really seasons, right? Because the circumstances around you change.
Mm-hmm.
Might have to move. The job will be different. You might have more or less mental space to give to a relationship. There might be tension. Things might be, but there are also moments where things might flow more smoothly. And there's really that dance here. And to me, there's this thing in accepting that dance that sometimes it's gonna have to be about really discussing about how much effort is put into this and what who's not going, who could be doing more and how and how. At the same time, like acknowledging the fact that moments where things are kind of that state of like flow and more. I don't know if that makes sense, but to me, there's really those two poles
Yeah.
there. That if you manage to integrate them somehow, get the sense that they're just part of the thing, you 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 get wiser. I feel so. I think that's why I would slightly disagree with him. I do think there's space for acknowledging that moment, those moments where things do turn out well, and we don't know why, and we don't know why. I think it's a very American thing. I don't know if it's American, but when you're trying to control everything, trying to like, if I get the parameters just right, things will be all right. I just need to figure this out. Kind of like forget about the happily ever after. It's all about like how I manage the thing on the day to day, how much I put it. Do I do the same thing? Did I give the right gift at the right time? Did I just kind of is it? I feel yeah, sure, but there are also things that are beyond your control, and are more like bigger trend in a way like those things unfold. I feel that we should also respect. That's kind of almost beyond us, right? Almost.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that, I do think happily ever after could exist, right? Except that it's not going to be perfect every single day, right? I mean, there are couples out there, who still, hold hands when they cross the road, when they're in the 80s. I've seen a lot of those around the world,
It's so
right? And
sweet,
that's
right?
sweet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, it might not look that way every single day at every moment, right? Some days they could be fighting over a toothbrush. I don't know. But the point is that, it's more like the overall sense that they're still satisfied, they're still happy. And I think that to kind of write off something as, oh, it's too idealistic, sure, right? But, we want to also understand, where sort of the assumptions are coming from. Are you expecting that every single moment is going to be great? That's not going to happen, right? And it's really accepting that even if there are flaws, that's okay. That's just kind of part of the whole journey anyway. Yeah. So, I mean, again, this idea about, happily ever after. I mean, I remember one time someone I dated told me that, life is not a fairy tale, right? You can live in a fairy tale. I'm like, well, life isn't. We all know that. But maybe it's up to us to make it a fairy tale, isn't it? I mean, you can do little things that make it really a lot more magical than the mundane life that we already lead. So I agree with Nico. I think that, it's, yeah, a little bit cynical, the way this idea is put across. I mean, I can see where it comes from because, certainly if we have a very idealistic approach to relationships, yeah, we can feel like, a lot of these things are not acceptable and they're, flaws and we want to check out. But maybe if we change our relationship to those flaws, things can be a lot easier. Maybe that's our happily ever after. Yeah.
The new normal.
That's right. Yeah. And you, Sean? Any thoughts?
Um,
There's a lot of sighing today.
yeah, it's the
Tender, no?
memories come back, right? Yeah, the memories just tend to come back when I think about this. I would say when I think of happily ever after, at some point you might feel like you're there, right? Like the first time I felt happily ever after was when the first time I felt like I was ready to settle. Like, oh, this is it. Like after so long, like this is the one. And then it turned out that it was not meant to be, right? Because stuff happened, and you kind of get thrown back, right? Like the whole idea that you're finally there, it's just messed up. Yeah, and it takes a while after you become single again to realize and look back that, oh, actually people do change. It's some of it is within your control, some of it isn't. Yeah, but it's an opportunity also to look at it from the perspective of you, like how have I changed, how have I became better, how have I became maybe not even better or worse, but just became a different person myself over the years. Yeah, so I would say that don't quite understand this picket fence and splinter thing. But I would say that this idea of happily ever after, it does come at some point. Um, and when you become single again, the first idea is that it's just kind of, the whole idea just kind of shattered. It makes it hard to believe in it again. because there's so much emotion that goes into feeling that. Like, I don't know how like other people feel, right? Like for me, I've never felt it for anyone except for other than one
Mm,
person, right? And
mm.
when you finally feel like that, and you realize that, oh, this might be the time, and it turns out not. Oh, it's quite shattering, right? And it makes you question, is there such a thing ever?
I guess it depends on where you're at in your journey of recovery from the breakup, right? I think in a very acute phase, it's very hard to go, oh, I can rewrite this idea of happily ever after. I can, learn to love myself more or partner myself. Um, yeah, and I guess when you're in that phase, it's a lot easier to go, yeah, this doesn't make any sense, right? This whole thing is messed up. I don't believe in it at all. What picket fence? I don't even want any fence. I mean, you know, so it depends on where you're at as well. I think the context does matter.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my feelings or my thoughts might be pretty different when I get to, like, 1 year on from the breakup, right? You
Mm.
you kind of look back in a way that's more calm. I think, like, for me, it's about 6, 7, 8 months already, and I feel like I can look at it in a more, I guess, open way. Like, it's still not okay. I to say that it haunts me, that's not really true, lah. That experience, but I feel like I can accept it a lot better. Yeah.
Mm.
And just by realizing, what was within my control, what was not in my control. And sometimes these are things that uh, I discover when I journal, when I write, and I engage with myself in a space where there's no need for pride, there's no need for ego, there's no need for anything. It's just me and the book, right? And I just write. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Which brings us to point number 3. There is no the one. So, kind of in reference to what you said earlier.
Yeah.
Um, the idea that there is only one person you're supposed to be with forever is, yes, very romantic, but also limiting and a surefire recipe to stay in your head and in a chasing state. It leaves no room for acceptance and gratitude. The truth is that the one is the one you choose to love right now, today. And if there is no one you're choosing to love, then that person is you. Yeah. Nico is deep in thought.
No, I was thinking of a story I read just yesterday.
Yeah. What about?
That I don't know if that's really related, but I just share it.
It's okay. We're all tangential somehow.
About Tara Brach, the meditation teacher.
Oh, yeah.
So who was living in a pretty intense yoga kind of spiritual community I think in the 80s or 70s, 80s. Sorry. Well, essentially, it was really the real thing, right? Like borderline cult and so on. But essentially, her spiritual teacher, she and other people, right, he essentially decided for her who she was going to marry within the community.
Like an arranged marriage?
Yeah, so they would say, "Are you going to marry that guy?" And she did that, and they had a child, and she had some issue with the community, so she left. But she stayed married with the guy for 5 more years. And after 5 years, she realized that actually they were getting along great, but he just wasn't the right person for her, because he wasn't the person that she would have chosen. So
Wow.
I guess my point, there's limit to that.
Mm.
When we hear that a lot, like that sense of like, oh, it's just the person you choose. And in human history, we have like essentially it was arranged marriages like all the way through, right? There was no such thing as not a marriage where people will pick who they want to be with. I mean, I'm pushing it, but that was the norm, let's say, in traditional societies, and so in some traditional societies. But so that we think of that, essentially anyone will be fine as long as you really deeply care for the person, but apparently not. There's also an element of the element of choice is really crucial. If it was, I would say that's what makes it so hard. If it was, it would be fine if it was just you can pick anyone and that's going to work. But it's not, unfortunately, not how it works.
Well, statistics show that if you are in an arranged marriage, you're more likely to succeed in a marriage, isn't it? I mean, as opposed to the marriage ending in divorce, versus if you had free will and choice. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well,
is it because of this idea that you have options out there? Whereas if you're in an arranged marriage, like there's no need to think about other options, right? It's just not accepted. It's just not allowed.
What? Well, my objection would be yes, possible, but I would also look at what kind of like maybe families or societies have arranged marriages as the norm, and how much then options people are in those societies or families. It could be that yes, there is arranged marriages, but just also divorcing is really not very much of an option, and you're gonna essentially essentially potentially cut yourself from the whole of your family and community and family support, like as Sarah Bragg did essentially. If you well, she did that beforehand, but I mean if you were to break the marriage. So I mean there might be some other pressure on the individual to stay in a marriage that comes from family, that comes from you get what I mean. So I think we know it's possible, but we don't know what the individual would want for themselves if they had all the option they could and so on.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? I mean, sorry.
Go ahead, Amerie. Go.
No, I was just wondering if in this story, if she didn't feel so strongly towards the idea that she didn't have a say, I wonder if she would still end up even if she sort of had her own choice, would she still pick the same person? You know what I mean? Yeah. Because the truth is that she might, but it sounds like she's also reacting to this idea that, well, she didn't actually have a say. Someone else decided for her, and that was kind of a breach, right, for her, perhaps towards her sense of freedom or choice. Yeah.
In some sense, I've heard from some friends like who had arranged marriages that they met the person only like just a very short while before the marriage, so they were they caught up with each other or something like that, and then they started chatting, and their job was to make it work. It wasn't like let's explore and see if we like each other. There's no such thing, right? It is you're going to talk to this person and figure out a way to work it out with this person. So the mindset and the perspective is very different.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, there's no such thing as one type of marriage, right?
Yeah.
I mean, people marry for billions of reasons. You can marry because you love the person. You can marry for because you're asked to. You can marry based on financial interest because it makes sense financially. You can marry for because you want to be living in another country. You want a better life, whatever that means. There's many reasons why you can marry without love being part of the equation at all as a first step, right? So your measure of success in marriage won't then be is love there, is the bond there almost. I mean, it in some type of marriages it won't be relevant anymore. As long as you're married, you're doing fine. As long as things function okay, you're doing fine. So in some cases, you get what I mean? So we tend to project that for everyone, because it might matter for us that bond, having the love and the care would be important in marriage, but for some people, no, it's not. they can find that elsewhere, maybe, I mean, friends or whatever. They don't need to have that as part of the marriage. Marriage would be something else. That would be, yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
So we all. Sorry.
I mean, even if you look at even in France, for instance, if you look at marriage laws, it's really just a contract. It's a secular country, so it would have a very different meaning than what it might have in the US, for instance, or other countries that are not so secular. So it's just simply a contract between two individuals, and that's it. And then you can put whatever you want behind it. There doesn't have to be love in there or any kind of bond. It's stated nowhere. Yeah. So
Wow.
that can make it very open in terms of how you approach it.
Yeah, that's not romantic at all.
No, it's not. But to be fair, that paved the way for more. Well, I don't want to go and start myself into a lecture, but that, for instance, in Middle Age in France, actors were not allowed to marry because acting was supposed to be like an evil occupations, and so that would be just totally evil to if they could get married. So that kind of like this kind of thing that seems to be like heartless and just purely transactional made it actually ironically possible for people to do have that kind of like official kind of bond, yeah, which were excluded before.
Right. So there is no the one. We all agree.
Yeah, I think for people who feel like that person was the one and the only one, I think they would get hit very hard, right? And sometimes people see that they get into the relationship for it's under different circumstances, right? So sometimes it is religious. So I have some friends who say, "Oh, God has prepared like one person for me, and I'm looking and waiting for that person to come along." Right? Based on the people that I know, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. All right, and then there are, I think, the other instance where people feel like there is the one is okay. So I have some friends who I would say largely female, right? As they get to 28, 29, 30, 31, and they have not had a relationship before, they kind of feel like the stakes are higher. That the next relationship that they get in should be the one that they settle with, especially if they want to have kids and they want to have a family. Right? It probably might not be true, but it's a story that they tell themselves, right? Because of the pressure that they get from themselves or society. And when it doesn't work out, it becomes very devastating. It's probably going to be different for a person who's had relationships before, because you kind of realize that you grow at with every relationship, right? Not you don't necessarily need a relationship to grow, but if you've gone through it, you understand yourself better. Yeah, and I think in those instances, it can be quite shattering for a person who believed that the person they got together with was the one and the only one. Yeah. So, and that I would imagine that can come with a lot of feelings of hatred, of anger, of disbelief, of just disillusionment, and just writing off this entire relationship thing again. Yeah. And depending on how they got this idea of the one, then it becomes even more difficult to convince them again, or to help them see that there is a different perspective.
Which makes sense, but because in a way it's kind of a entitlement.
An entitlement?
Yeah, in a sense, my sense is that if you think there's only one relation, there's one person, and you found it, you just, there's no work you have to do. You're good to go. You found it. right? I mean, right?
Right. You're good to go.
It's entitlement, right? I mean, it's like,
Good to
okay,
go.
great. Yeah. You just kind of just keep rolling along. There's just no work whatsoever you have to do on yourself. I mean, I'm pushing it, but to some degree there's an element of like, um, behind this idea that there's the one. It's the sense that I don't need to change. I'm just great as I am. There's nothing I have to change about myself, the way I behave, and so on. I have no effort to make. You know that sense that I won't be any different in 10 years down the road than I am now.
Mm.
Meaning I won't get any wiser. I won't, or if I do, it's gonna be irrelevant to how I behave with my mate, which I find deeply disturbing. Like you're gonna age, you're gonna go wiser, but that won't make any difference about how. I don't know. There's a number of things in that idea that just don't hold up. I feel on them. When you kind of look at it.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, it brings to mind the idea of soulmates, right? If you read pop articles when you're bored,
Yeah.
there's heaps of those out there on soulmates, and like debates on, is there just one soulmate or many soulmates? Yeah.
What's the argument for is there one soulmate?
Argument?
Yeah, I mean like one soulmate or many soulmates, right? Because I I I don't. Okay, by soulmate, do you mean like a relationship, or you mean like just friendships and people that you can confide in?
So from the many articles, I think it's defined quite differently,
Okay.
right? But from what I understand, I mean, it doesn't have to be romantic. It can be, platonic. It's just someone you connect really deeply with.
Yeah, so why should there only be one?
Exactly. Yeah. I definitely don't think so. It's very limiting, right? Again, quite similar to the idea of the one. Um, yeah, and this idea that there should be only that one person, right? And that person's not with me, right? There's a lot of frustration because they should be with me, right? There's just a lot more rigidity around it, more tension, um, as opposed to this idea that there are different people out there you can have really deep and meaningful connections with,
Mm,
right? Yeah,
mm,
it frees you up, and over time you realize you don't have to hold on to that one relationship that you thought was the only one ever that will work out for you, um, because that would bring so much more pain than freeing yourself up to explore these other connections with good people out there.
mm,
Brings me to a thought that I was discussing with a friend a couple of weeks back, and we were talking about relationships and breakups. And one of the things that um, I mentioned that, oh, when I broke up, I felt like my pillar of support was gone, and it came to some idea of a safety net and a foundation, right, that allowed me to build on because I could be extremely vulnerable with the the person I was with. Correct. So when I became single again, then the question is, do I actually miss that person, or do I miss this idea of a safety net and a comfort,
Mm,
a foundation? And the implications of that is if anyone else could come in and be that foundation, then I don't actually miss the initial person that much. Correct. But I don't know. What do you think of that? Is that because it just makes this idea of you are special so much lesser because there
mm.
could be many other people that can provide that same level of emotional support. What do you think?
actually, many years ago, I had a very similar process as you, Sean, thinking that perhaps it's not the person, you know, that was special, but it's really that bond you share with another person, right? It's not about that unique person per se, but what is special connection brings, right? The emotions that come up in this very safe relationship, where you could just completely be yourself. Yeah. Nicole, are you okay?
Yeah, okay. Sorry.
Yeah. I think that's a hint for us.
No.
Chop chop.
No, just one thing that came to mind was yeah, there's also beyond the idea of like there's one person, there's also the idea of like complementarity. Like you find someone who complement you in a way,
Mm.
and that's why also it stays kind of there. It's an idea that, or a view that sticks. That's the idea that okay, there's one person or one type of person. If it's not one person, it's like one type of person. Because I think there's some truth in the fact that yeah, in a relationship, some partnership work well because there's this complementary in the way people are functioning. Like in many kind of dimension, right? In the way they express their care for the other, in the way they function in life. Some people might be very aggressive and unable to do any self care, and the other person would be like more like laid back and more like able to provide some kind of care to the other. There's a number of
Opposites attract.
options. Yeah. But I think with the idea of like there's one person, it's like we tend to think there's only one dimension to us. So there's us, one dimension, and there's one complementary thing. But actually, it's not. There can still be the idea of complementarity, but it's just many different dimensions. You can people who complement you in some, but not on other, and the other way around, and that might still work. That might still, because we're fluid. There's ways we can work around things and change and adapt.
That's where the compromises that you make are different kinds of compromises, right? In like some other area.
Yeah, exactly. There's a area where you don't need to talk. Like it works for both people because it's just there's this kind of thing that just naturally fall into place.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. It's fascinating because I work with a lot of families, and it's just amazing how like they can be so different. You can have a couple who's completely just you don't know how they got together, but it just works. They're so different, and you really just struggle to visualize how a day-to-day life could be like for them, but it works. Right. Yeah, so I think it's really fascinating.
So I'm wondering maybe like not a task, but a project maybe for that single again phase could be to discover those new dimensions of yourself that you didn't know about, and for which you could match up with someone else. Maybe. I mean that's one of the value I think understanding yourself better. You get a better sense that maybe some dimension have been neglected in a relationship. Some parts of who I am weren't there. And there could be someone out there who would be a better match to kind of allow that part to grow or to express itself or to be present, and those things change as well, I feel.
I feel like I kind of learn a bit more about myself because there were some things that I initially told myself that cannot, like I can't accept it. Yeah, okay, truth to be told, it wasn't like a deal breaker kind of thing, right? But some things that I felt a very strong stance on, it was I kind of felt like I was able to compromise because there was another area that seemed to make up for it, right? And that area was something that the past relationships could not bring. And I kind of realized that that was also very important to me. Yeah, so single again. Wouldn't have learned all these things if I was attached.
Yeah,
See, you're so much wiser.
Yeah.
Sorry?
You're so much wiser now.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
And there's this hint that maybe we're in that phase and then single again, and we discover those new dimensions of ourselves or new aspect of ourselves. So there's this hint that maybe is that possible to do then in a relationship? maybe in a relationship I can find ways to have space to, continue growing in that way, explore those new dimensions, so that when I ignore them, so I don't run the risk of, ignoring them for too long, and then that might bring to, separation or something. Trying to track like where you're at, how you're changing, how your needs are evolving, and maybe something that can help the relationship evolve to the next phase, or when it's openly discussed. I'm wondering, just kind of a challenge. Say, okay, do I really need to be single again to do that, or can that be done somewhat, during a relationship?
Yeah.
And
There's
how?
something that I wanna discuss, which is, when you become single again, right? There's this temptation to get back into a relationship sometimes. Some people call it a rebound, and because there's this big gap, right? There's a hole that's waiting to be filled, and someone just seems to come in. But how do you know that you're actually really ready, like to get in a relationship? How do you know whether it's a rebound or it's not a rebound?
Okay, so like I would always be tempted to ask, do you need to know?
Why?
So why is it important to know?
That's a very therapy kind of question.
No, I'm curious, genuinely. No, it's
I
not. It's
would
not
say the same
targeting
thing
you,
in
Sean,
therapy.
specifically. Just in general, I'm just curious. What? Because it's a question I've asked
Hmm.
myself also, and it's like, but does it matter almost? Um, can you know? All those questions. Like really, I don't know.
Is it important to know? I
Yeah.
think
Well,
so.
why?
Like why? Okay, so why would it not be important?
Well, well, I could imagine that. Um, like like when circumstances where I see would be important would be like if you going out there dating and say, okay, you're looking to get married and you're looking for a serious relationship, meaning if what you're claiming you're looking for is not aligned with really where you're at, so that would be an issue, right? Because if you're going there, you want to be sure that that's you're really in there, you've processed everything you have to process, and it's really going to be a relationship that's there for a long run. But then you could also imagine like approaching your next dating phase as being quite open and be like, I really don't know, you know. And you might meet people who are totally fine with that as well. Like actually, a friend had a story where he came out of a really long relationship, and it was a heavy commitment one where he had bought a house with his girlfriend. It was really big deal. I mean, there are a number of like financial commitment. They weren't married, but it was almost like a marriage. And he had a lot of trouble like at the end of the relationship, and essentially enter in a relationship with another person who was kind of at the same stage, you know, and they kind of like each other, and they didn't know where they were wanting to go, but they kind of essentially were together where um, the relationship ended eventually, but it was clear they were healing together in that relationship. They were doing some kind of work together that they didn't seem to be willing or ready to do alone. And both of them being clear for the beginning that they didn't know, because they could see where the other was at, and clearly not a good place to commit long term right away. So that's what I mean. That, there might be why look right away for something that's going to be like a long term thing, and so on.
Wow.
So you're saying that you could have mutual needs met.
Yeah. And I mean, it was beyond, friends with benefits. It wasn't that, you could think it was that, but there was something else there. Yeah, there was something. Well, from I could see and talking to him. Um,
Yeah.
um, yeah, and that definitely helped each other out of something. That wasn't the one relationship that would last them to their old years, but that was something that was meaningful, clearly. Mm.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to tell, right? I think,
Mm.
whether or not you're in a state of, wanting to pursue something because, um, you're still trying to get over the previous relationship. I mean, unless you're quite able to tune in with yourself and check in and see where you're at, I think, it's a very hard question to answer,
Mm.
right? You could be, in a decent space and think that you're ready for the next relationship, and then the other person comes along and triggers something in you, and you go, oh, actually I haven't really moved on. Then is that really a rebound relationship or not, right? So I think it's really hard to tell, but I think what we can do that's really important is just to be open to the other party and to kind of
Mm.
share that this is where we're at, right? I'm not quite sure yet, but this is where I'm at right now. And if things change, perhaps it would be really helpful for us to keep communication really open and honest. And yeah, we can talk about that should things come up. Yeah.
And there are times that people say it's important to have the duration, take the duration and the time to grieve.
Mm.
Um, and you should not get into a relationship so soon, right? What I mean, just for everyone here,
Mhm.
including myself, right? Like, what do you see as the importance of this grieving phase? Like, what does it do for people?
It is important to grieve properly, because if you rush into yet another relationship too soon, your focus would be quite different. You're building another relationship, right? You still have unfinished business with yourself, with your past experiences, and if you didn't really process them um, adequately, you'll be bringing into the new relationship some baggage, emotional baggage,
Mm.
perhaps past hurts, right? Some resentment from the previous relationship. Yeah. So I think
Mm.
time is important, but then, no one can really tell how long exactly. Um, right. We don't want to go to the extreme where we wait 10 years before we go into yet another relationship. Um,
Mm.
yeah, but I guess aiming for a good enough space, a space where you feel like you're not constantly thinking back to the past and
Mm.
raking up, painful memories and feeling
Mm.
this aching in your heart every day that you wake up and feeling like you're jaded or cynical. Yeah, if
Mm.
for the most part you're learning to enjoy life, um you can start finding yourself again, right? You're enjoying sort of things you used to love. um I think that's a good sign.
Mm. Yeah, and I would add just yeah, and don't be too hard on yourself, like in the sense like
Mm,
in the way you monitor your grief, because I think that grief it's really like waves. It's really its own
yeah.
life. We have no control over it. And yeah, there's like the first wave and the second wave, and then smaller and smaller waves. And sometimes the wave is
Mm,
slightly bigger, and
Mm.
it can go on for years for some
mm,
relationships. And then sometimes we can be a bit hard on ourselves and be like, oh, and you feel like, you might be with someone and you're thinking about past relationship and there's sadness or regrets, and you'll be like, oh, that means I'm not ready. I shouldn't have rushed into that. I mean, you don't know really, like give it space also, it can coexist with what's next, and it has to, otherwise, as Mary said, you'll be waiting 10 years, and, so accept that those things can coexist, right? Like the new
mm,
and still some of the life of the old.
mm.
Mm.
We have a comment from Ivy. Hello, Ivy. So Ivy says this: I think each relationship should be independently reviewed rather than to keep comparing with what has happened. Yeah, and I think the perspective of this, it's projecting your experience from a past relationship onto like a new person, right? And I think it's um I would say it's important to recognize that every person is different, but it sometimes can be quite unavoidable, right? Like because some people have been scarred quite deeply and you still have fears about it. Um, and this fears that you have about getting into a relationship, um, like I don't know, right? Like if you have those fears, does it mean that you're not ready to get into another relationship? Or does it just mean that um, maybe you haven't found the right person that makes you want to let go?
Is this a question for us?
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah. I had this just a thought. Is that So I think it's normal to want to have that kind of like blank slate. We really want to offer that to ourselves, I think, and to the other person, like coming to the next relationship with a blank slate, and then none of what happened before. Hoping that none of what happened before, like none of the baggages would be there to color or change like what the experience is. But my sense is that okay, sure, but I think it's hard to. I mean, some of the difficult experiences we've had in the past, they take time to process, and I think wanting to discard them right away, it's also like losing an opportunity to. Sean is gone.
Yeah.
It's also losing an opportunity to learn from them, I think. And also, my sense is that when you get in a relationship, so it mean you have those baggages and you have those, and they might color the way you evaluate the relationship. I feel like some people to some people you meet, they might not matter. Meaning you might have like whatever you carry from the past relationship might not have an impact of a new person on the new person you're meeting. And to me, that's almost like a blank slate. That's almost something that's new, right? Almost. You get what I mean? You might have
But
some fear.
that's saying that the other person might not like doesn't quite mind it, but it's whether
Yeah,
you
it's not
can you
triggering.
care about it, right? Like
Yeah. You might
it's
still have.
more than the other person.
Yeah, in the sense that you might still carry some fears of some baggages, what we typically call baggages, or weird pattern, but they're not patterns that make the other person um, that trigger the other person. Meaning you can be pulling back, for instance, because you've been hurt or whatever, but the other person might not read that as you going away. They might still feel like secure while you're pulling back. So you get what I mean. So there might be things you think you feel you do because you've been hurt. Doesn't mean that they're necessarily gonna have a big impact on the other person. You get what I mean? They might, but not all. They can be spaces where the other person won't find that threatening and will maybe just understand that okay, you've been out of a long relationship and that won't. That makes sense, right? And you need time, or does that make sense?
It's the idea. It's the idea you mentioned before, right, Nico? I think this idea of complementing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So you have different kinds of triggers, right?
Mm.
Different patterns of biases, right? And
Mm.
when it works, it's essentially sort of them fitting a bit like a jigsaw. So you're not really sort of clashing, right? But perhaps the triggers are different, and it doesn't scare the other, or doesn't really impact the partner as much as it impacts you. And in a way, you also learn from your partner's reaction that, you know what, it's safe. It's okay to have these fears, right? And that's what makes a relationship secure.
So meaning you there's some leeway. We don't have to have everything like lined up and be fully ready and be.
Yeah. So aiming for good enough is good.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Ivy, for the comment. Okay, we are at 1 hour 20, and seems like it's time to wrap up.
Yeah.
Okay,
Nico did well with his voice.
Yeah, managed.
Good on you.
Yeah, that deep, sexy voice.
It sounds better now. I think it's, lubricated with all
Yeah,
the
it's warming
talking.
up.
So
It's warming up. Yeah.
maybe you need to talk more.
Yeah.
Maybe we should
Need
carry
some rest
this
as
thing
well.
on
That
until
was a
2
weak
hours.
laugh.
No,
You know?
no. I will just collapse.
Okay.
Yeah.
Final thoughts. I would say for me, overall, being single again, the initial phase is really painful, and it just takes some time to come to terms that sometimes it's just not meant to be between you and the other person, right? If it was meant to be, things would probably have fallen into place with a bit of effort from both sides. But sometimes the issues would just out of your control. Sometimes people change, sometimes people grow up, they get different experiences and they realize that maybe this is not what I want. And therefore, you're both single again. And that could be a blessing rather than, classifying it as a lifelong painful event. So there's always the other perspective of things, right? And that could also be a sign that there's something better on the horizon, someone more suitable. And without being single again, you might not have had the opportunity to meet that really special person, the one, the happily ever
The
after,
better one. The better one.
the better one. Yeah. And it does take time. The initial phase, it's hard to believe any of these things could be possible. But just like the thoughts or the suggestion that I was given, if you look back 1 year down the road and you look back, you realize that it was the right decision. Yeah. Starting to feel that now.
That's great.
All right. Emery, you're up next.
So I think it's one of those things that never gets any easier. It's not like, you learn with experience and, it gets easier over time.
Yeah.
I think every heartbreak is painful in its own unique ways. The pain is always a shock, right? No matter how many times you've been through it. Sure, you understand, the ropes more as you go, but it doesn't get easy or easier. And I think that with being single again, I think a lot of times there's a lot of fear that people have, that they wouldn't be able to manage, they don't know what to do, right? Their whole lives had been sort of, preparing for a certain sort of, settling down with a partner and feeling really vulnerable, without them and feeling really lost. So, there's one thing I could say. It is that, don't be afraid to be in that space. I think, a lot of people have been through this phase, right? And, it's really scary. There's a lot of fear, right? But, we can also learn a lot from this whole process. And, we don't want to sort of fear going to another relationship just because the previous one didn't work out so well, right? It's not a reflection of our flaws or our inadequacies, or it's not something about us that's defective. I think we didn't mention, but there's often a lot of shame that also comes with the idea of being single yet again, right? And I think that really stops people from sometimes going to another relationship. Yeah, so I think it's important to acknowledge that that the fear is normal, right? It's scary to be vulnerable again, right? But we don't want that fear to stop us from showing up and trying, right? Because there are people out there, who might be better, right? The better one for you.
Happily ever after.
Yeah, it can happen, right? Just look around at the 80-year-olds, holding hands while crossing the road.
Yeah.
Nico.
I don't know if I have thoughts, but it was sorry. It's timing is 4. I know. That's the. I'm here. Okay.
Good to know.
Um,
Good to know.
Yeah, good to know. I was
my
about to
voice
say
is
that.
here somewhat. Um, yeah, I think for me it's like really that time where you wanna don't be too hard on yourself, and not to kind of explore like giving you more freedom. Also in terms of like what you do with your time, who you spend time with, but also how you look about how freedom in what freedom in how you look at your relationships. Like what do they need to be? What does a partner need to be? What will my relationship needs to look like? Um, when will I be ready? We have those kind of like benchmarks. Okay, once I'm gonna be there, then I can start dating again. So it's gonna be we're like, okay, in 6 months, where am I at now? There's those we can't have ourselves like jumping through hoops. Um, and really monitor ourselves closely, like checking with friends. You think I'm ready? You think, but I think it's helpful to. I don't think I have an advice really, but my sense is that think about this as something that's more fluid. Like having the so-called recovery process can blend in some early kind of like dating exploration, or not. Because really, you don't know where you're gonna be ready. No one else knows. No, really, no one else knows. That will really depend on what who's the person you meet next will be. Um, so there's that, and LC, and also like playing with the idea that maybe what kind of other partner would be good for me. Like there was this one person, but if I just who do I find attractive, who do I seem to connect with, who kind of like outside of like a box, kind of like is there like several parameters there, several kind of type of people, and there's that. And doing that also, looking at who feels attracted to you. That's very, very useful, because that's something that has nothing to do with you. You see like who seems to be attracted to you. These are all ways to kind of get a sense of how you've changed and how you're still changing after the relationship, and therefore what the next relationship might look like, and it might open up options for you there.
Yeah, right. I'll end this off with a short story or experience that just crossed my mind, and then, yeah, and then we'll say goodbye for this episode. I remember at the point where I became single again, and my partner, business partner, we were trying to schedule some meetings, and he's like, Tuesday night. I'm like, yeah, sure. Wednesday night. I'm like, yeah, sure. Thursday night. Yeah, sure, can. He's like, there is a noticeable increase in flexibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that sums it up, right? There are many sides to being single again, right? There's the heartbreak, but there's also the flexibility. There's also the freedom to explore, and if you make
Space.
the space to
Mm.
explore, yeah. All right. And it might not be such a bad thing after all. Okay.
Indeed.
All right. For everyone who's still here listening to us, thank you so much for staying with us. It's really late now. Yeah. And if you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, which is my YouTube channel actually, but if you haven't followed our Facebook page on the Inside Podcast, do so. If you would like to listen to on the Inside Podcast with the audio only version, we are on Spotify, we're on Anchor, we're on Apple Podcasts. Wherever you listen to your podcast, we are likely there. All right. Anywhere that you can engage with us, feel free to drop us a message. Let us know what you'd like to hear. We're always in for feedback. And we hope you enjoyed the 11th episode. Next episode, is that the final episode for season 2?
It is, and it's on Boxing Day.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Ah,
Yeah. Christmas
Yeah.
being
Nico,
Christmas being the
yeah,
Saturday.
okay.
Yeah, he's doing the math.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we look forward to seeing all of you 2 weeks later, and have a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye bye.